Hi. This morning I'm approaching this video with mixed emotions. I spent the weekend looking at different videos on JonBenet Ramsey, and man, it's complicated. And that, you know, being that she was just a child, it really makes it difficult to tell the story. But it may take me 3 videos, 3 parts to get all of this over to you. First of all, several of the videos that I saw, they try to blame her parents. Now, I seem to remember Frank saying something about we made her parents pay. So I thought maybe he, made them watch whatever they were doing. But now that I've seen several interviews of the parents, I think these parents acted and reacted the way normal parents would have. Um, the and the brother, they said because he was smiling all the time. But I have uh, a little guy in my family who smiles all the time. He was born with a smile on his face, so I can't hold that against this guy. I really don't think the family had anything to do with this. The problem is that Frank thinks, and this is what he told me because I met with him about a year before this happened, and he said that, have you seen that little girl on TV, the model? And he said her name or whatever, or I said it, and then he goes, yeah, well, she's not supposed to be doing that. Somebody needs to make her pay. And it's her parents that are dressing her up that way, so they need to pay. And he already had this in his mind, a year before it happened, or maybe even 2 years. But just to let you know, I was around when she was famous, and for a period of time there, every time you turned the TV on or switched the channels, JonBenet Ramsey was prancing around with her cute little model uniforms and her big hats and her big hair and, all kinds of things with makeup to make her look like an adult. And that just drove Frank to the edge, man. He couldn't live with that. And I think he went up there and got in that house with the Anglin brothers, and they did what they did. And I'm going to try and tell you why I think that. But I got to get a lot of other things across to you first. Now, I got notes. I had to make notes. There's too many videos I had to watch. The big thing that they're using right now is the DNA evidence. First, they said it was one man's DNA that was found on her panties and her long johns, and they mark this up with a light, and they highlight all over her like somebody crawled all over her with DNA. And then when you get these other reports, you find out there was very small amounts of DNA that may not even be consequential. But the truth about the DNA thing was that there were at least 3 people's DNA in those samples that the police looked into. Bingo, we got our 3 guys there. Now, she had on a pair of panties and long johns that had the DNA on it. You look it up on the internet and it shows the panties. I hate to talk about this, but I have to get the point across. And the panties were open at the bottom. I'm thinking they had to do with the bedwetting problems that she was having. That lends to something that brings Frank Morris back into the spotlight again. The victim was sexually molested and abused. They don't tell you what or how, but they tell you about this minuscule amount of DNA that they found. Well, if this was a traditional, rape as we think of it, you would have found something inside, and they never mentioned anything about that. But recall that one of the girls that Frank killed up there at the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, he shoved a pistol inside of her, and he said, here, this is what you came up here for, wasn't it? Because she was up there making out with her boyfriend. And he was getting off on hurting her with that pistol because that's what she came up there for, to get something stuck in her. Well, I'm thinking that may be what happened to this poor little girl. They did something like that because he would have never allowed he wouldn't have done a traditional rape because he couldn't, and the Anglin brothers, he wouldn't have let them do it if they wanted to, and I don't know if they wanted to or not, because I know they like to kill little kids, but I don't know if they like that. Now, these guys were saying that the DNA was 3 guys. In my book, I tell you that Frank told me years ago that up in the future they were going to have some way to map out who the victims were of these crimes. I mean, who the perpetrators of these crimes were. That would be better than fingerprints. And he mentioned DNA to me. He said, DNA's a map, isn't it? And I go, yeah. He knew I was, studying pre-med or whatever. And I go, yeah, it's a map. And he goes, well, and they're going to come up with a way to follow it. He knew this was going to happen, and I was concerned about it. I think he was concerned about it because he knew that it might be something that would, ultimately get him caught. But he also knew that the only way they get his DNA is to take it off of one of the Zodiac killer evidences that they have if they haven't contaminated it, and he knew that the chances of that probably weren't very good. But it's just interesting that he knew years and years before they came out with DNA evidence that it was coming. That's all of that being said. My opinion, because JonBenet's mother said that their house was so big, I think it was 29 rooms, that someone could have gotten in there and been in there for a week without them knowing about it, because they stayed in just 1 or 2 rooms of the house, and JonBenet stayed in her bedroom. They even showed pictures of the house and pointed out the rooms. So these guys could have been hid out there anywhere, living in that house, and they'd have never known about it. And you may remember they lived in a house that was behind my house. We had 3 houses there, and I was living in one. My parents were living in the other one, and these guys were living in the other one. They would sneak in there at night, and they'd bring people in there and torture them and kill them and bury them somewhere. So they're used to doing this kind of thing. And I think they went up there, they search things out, they stand around and watch people, they ask questions. Frank, being a genius, knew what to ask. And he gets the information that he needs, and then they start making their moves. There was an open window, because these guys they wouldn't break in somewhere, but they did come in through an open window at my house one time, and they stole my .32 Colt hammerless, which is the gun that I put to Frank's head when he was there at the dairy inn trying to get in. They had cut the telephone line, and I wish I had it back. It was a really nice little gun. Anyway, and I was a really good shot with it. But anyway, they could have stayed in this house. They could have I was telling you, they don't break entries, break into houses, but if the window was open, they'll come through it. And that's what they were saying happened. And there was a scuff mark on the wall where someone had, rubbed their foot on the wall, getting in and out, and or out. And that'd probably be John Anglin, because he had a bad leg and a bad ankle from jumping over the fence at, they said fence, but wall or whatever at Alcatraz. Personally, I think if you watch the movie, you'll hear where he drops a crowbar. I think that was him. He fell down that thing there because he's so uncoordinated, and he hurt his ankle. But then again, I ran over him one time in Mexico City and helped him hurt it some more. I didn't get the job done right, though. But anyway, I looked at the pictures of the garrote, the thing they choked her with. There's a lot of knots tied in this thing, and it all looks like the kind of thing John would do. But they usually never went that complicated. They just wrap a rope around somebody's neck or whatever, and do it that way. Okay. The garrote, the fractured skull, that's all the kind of things that these guys did. they did the same thing to Bob Crane, and he told me about that one before and after it happened. They told me that they were going to do this thing. He didn't tell me he was going to do it. He said somebody needed to make her pay. And sometimes he'd go like this, you know, which meant we're the ones that, like, they were chosen for that. I can't wait to go over the letter with you, but I'm going to have to do that in another video because it's just too many things. He never said he wrote the letter. He said someone got her, and you know, I'm sure it was him. There's no question about it. He knew it. He was so livid the year before that to tell me that I just knew he, you know, now in retrospect, I know that he would have had to have reacted on that. He couldn't control himself, and that's what he did. And they got in there and they killed the girl, and all of the weird stuff, like the father went down and looked there first, like he knew that's where she was at. I don't think any of that's important. I think that's just where he decided to look first, because probably the cops were looking around other places. And then they had this detective with the big eyes. She really, like, said several different things that just, I think, contaminated the whole case and made Mr. and Miss Ramsey look guilty. I hope Mr. Ramsey sees this film and contacts me, because I'm pretty sure I know what happened, and I know they didn't have anything to do with it. But Frank wanted to make them pay because he said she needs to pay and her parents need to pay. And I'm going to get the letter for you, print it here, and see if I can't do another video and tell you about the things in there. Don't miss this on the letter, because he's all over inside that thing. And then I'm going to tell you, you know, that's, well, my conclusion on the whole thing based on that. And that's why I'm going to call it quits today, because I want the video to get too long.